Talking About, a comms and learning podcast exploring the fascinating world of Sky. In this episode, we'll be discussing neuro-inclusion in the workplace, exploring and understanding the needs of neurodiverse colleagues and the benefits of neurodiversity in the workplace. Our guests today are Georgia Sheppard and Stacey Dobson, who will share their journeys and what this means for them at Sky. Hi, Georgia, and hi, Stacey, joining over Zoom. Thanks very much for joining me today.
No problem.
Sounds great.
Right, before we get started, how are you both? You both okay? Yeah? Cool.
All good?
Yeah.
Excellent. So what we do before we get into the discussion, we have a really quick icebreaker. We ask this question of all our guests, and I'm just really excited to hear what your answer is. So really quickly, and I'll start with Stacey first. What is your go-to karaoke song?
I had to think, Alanis Morissette, Ironic, proper 90s rock chick.
Love that. Love that. Have you performed it? Have you done it? Where can we
Several
see you doing
times.
this?
Yes. Most people know I like a good sing, so yeah.
Excellent. Well, when we have an event, we'll have to get you on the mic. I love that. Love that song. And Georgia, what about you?
I don't do karaoke. But when I was a kid, we used to play Sing Star a lot, and we would always sing Cascada every time we touch. So that's probably like the closest to a karaoke song, but not actual.
I love that. I'm not going to
karaoke.
attempt to sing that because that's quite a high. So yeah, if you don't know it, it's on Spotify. But yeah, I'm not going to give you a rendition about that. So, okay, brilliant. So before we begin, I'm going to just ask you to tell our listeners a little bit about you, what you do here at Sky, how long you've been at Sky. So Georgia, can you tell us a little bit about you?
So I'm a creative designer in the CSG studio, and I've been here for almost 6 months in like a couple days.
Excellent. And what exciting news about your 6 months here, because you joined us on a short-term contract, didn't you?
Oh, I'm permanent now.
Excellent.
Yay!
Yeah, we're so delighted to have Georgia as part of the team. She's slotted in fantastically. So yeah, we're really excited to have her. And Stacey, I'm pretty sure most of our listeners will know who you are, but if you could just let us know a bit about you and how long you've been at Sky.
Sure, I'm not sure knowing me is always a good thing in that team. But no, I'm Stacey Dobson. I have been at Sky for 5 years now. That's flown by. And I'm Director of Service Delivery and Time to Care. So I look after our wonderful Time to Care team who make all the magic happen. And I also do lots of work on the broadband change roadmap.
Fantastic. Brilliant. So, as we said, this episode is about neuro-inclusion in the workplace, and I'm delighted that you have agreed to share your stories with me. So I'm going to come to you, Stacey, and just ask, can you share your experience about neurodiversity and when were you first diagnosed?
Sure. So I had quite a recent diagnosis, kind of January of 2023. And it came about in probably a period of crisis in my life. So I had a number of things happen kind of in a short period of time, kind of started from a family bereavement and having to be the executor of somebody's estate for the very first time, which is quite challenging. We then had quite a serious road traffic accident, had to go to court and give evidence, and luckily nobody was very seriously injured, but it was a kind of kind of changing moment. And then we had difficult family news. So my son was on the diagnosis pathway for autism, and that, as anybody knows, is really challenging and long in this country.
Yeah,
and then
definitely
my
is.
dad was diagnosed with Parkinson's. So I took some time out from work. I got some counselling, and through kind of working through all of that stuff, it was actually my counsellor who said, sounds like some of these things have been an issue for a while. Have you ever thought about, getting assessed? And I hadn't really up until that point. I just thought I was a bit weird, I guess. And yeah, I was fortunate enough to be able to pay for my own assessment.
Mhm.
And I went through all the standard NICE clinical guidelines, and I was diagnosed with ADHD combination types. So partly hyperactive, partly inattentive. And I know a lot of people say this, but it was just a bit like someone had explained my entire childhood, right? And
Yeah.
things made sense. And so for me, it's still quite a recent diagnosis. I still think I'm still coming to terms with some of it,
Mhm.
and also some of the kind of feelings that come along with it.
Fantastic. Thank you. So it almost seems like, you obviously had all of these, unfortunate things that happened at the same time, but had they not happened, you probably wouldn't have led you to that path of getting a diagnosis.
Agree, like I would have still been masking, right? And I'm exceptional at masking. I've done it for 40 years, right?
We're gonna talk
If
about that in a little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but the kind of that period of stress kind of instigated a chain of
yeah,
events that has helped me ultimately.
fantastic. Thank you so much. And Georgia, same question for you.
So I was diagnosed with dyslexia when I was in about year 6, so about 10 years old. And my teacher kind of just went up to my mum and was like, I think she might be dyslexic, because so I would, during like English lessons, I would sit on like a smaller table with like a group of us, and we would go through spelling and everything. And like, it wasn't quite like learning support officially, but it was kind of like, these ones need a little extra help, but we can't send them to learning support right
Yeah.
now. But my ADHD diagnosis, again, is a lot more recent, and probably 2021 or 2022. And yeah, that kind of just came about because I was doing a postgraduate certificate in creative education at the time and learning about neurodiversity. And I was like, oh, that's me. Like that's just me. So then I went through the right to choose pathway.
Okay.
So you can like go to your NHS doctor and basically be referred to right to choose. And I went through Psychiatry UK or Psychiatric UK, Psychiatry UK.
Mhm.
And it's still like through the NHS, but it's a lot quicker, because I think if I'd stayed on the NHS list, I would have been still waiting. But it kind of sped up the process a lot more, but they're not always open.
So it seems for both of you, it was something else that led you to go and seek that diagnosis. I mean, from my side, my eldest daughter was diagnosed with ADHD at 14, and it's just one of those things that you hear in the news and people talk about, that females in particular seem to be diagnosed a lot later than boys, because I think when you think about ADHD, you automatically think about hyperactivity and little boys running around and not being able to sit still. So I think it's one of those almost myths that need to be dispelled, because everybody presents very differently. Morgan, I think, Stacey, you said combination ADHD, so
Yeah.
attentive, inattentive, and a little bit of hyperactivity.
Me too.
And I think that's where Morgan falls. She says to me sometimes, I can do 3 days work in 3 hours, or 3 hours work in 3 days, just depending on where she is in the balance. So Stacey, you just going back to what you were saying, your diagnosis came about because you were going through a lot of family, I don't want to say trauma, but a few experiences within your family, and you said that once you had your diagnosis, it almost felt like it made sense.
Yeah.
So when you were growing up in school,
Yeah.
how were you feeling at those times? I know you said that you thought you were just weird. There's nothing wrong with being weird. Weird people are fantastic, by the way.
I'm like weird and proud, by the way. That
Excellent.
wasn't like a judgment thing. It was just I felt different. I've
Mhm.
always felt different. Very from being a very young age, right? My mum took me to the doctors when I was really little and said, look, she's just hyperactive. She won't sleep. And they used to she used to say to put coffee in my bottle. Um,
Oh.
which I now know as I know about medication, right? It's a stimulant. It'll help you calm down because it occupies the part of your brain that is needing more stimulation, right? So for me, the signs were there really early. My mum, when she filled out the questionnaire, we had a right giggle. Like, I've never laughed so much in my life. And she was just like, yeah, she said you wouldn't sleep. I was quite academic at school. I have really good memory for things.
Yeah.
But also I have a really good ability to join the dots, which is a gift, right? I finished all my reading books in like year 2. I was just bringing in stuff from home because that's what I did. And there was a serious debate about whether we moved me up a year. But my mum, actually, to her credit, said, look, she's emotionally immature. She needs to be with her peers. Like, you can. She made a really great call, actually, in that sense. And so for me, I always felt different, and how that showed up was in my head. I always catastrophized. I always overthought things. I was quite a kind of worrying child. I was always a target for bullies because I was quite uh, kind of like I just got on with it. Like the mundane tasks that you really
Yeah.
struggle with. I was just like, you know, if I just get that out of the way, I can do something I really like, right? So homework and stuff like that, I just used to come in and sit down and get it done, and then I could do something I actually wanted to do. So for me, I always felt quite different. Always a bit of a daydreamer, like always staring out a window, singing or doing something. And I think when you look back at those obvious signs, particularly my mum's answers to some of those questions about, you said Morgan can kind of like almost hyper focus and get work done. I did my dissertation in the 2 days before I handed it in. I didn't study for my GCSEs, which I'm not proud of, right? But I crammed at the last minute, and I think I need a certain level of pressure and stress to really perform. Whereas if you tell me something's due in 6 weeks' time, I'll procrastinate for 5.5 weeks, and then I might actually do something in the last few days. All of that stuff was all there, and I just felt like this stuff didn't go on in other people's heads.
Yeah. I mean, some of the things that you said there, I see Morgan in that. And Georgia, how did how does your ADHD present? Is it very similar to Stacey, or very different?
So I think with work, I'm not a massive procrastinator because I've got that like high achievement, I need reward kind of thing. So with that, it doesn't show up there, but like I'll put off doing the laundry for ages and like mundane tasks like that. I'm very good at almost forgetting to clean my teeth. Like, don't worry, they are cleaned, but like it's one of those ones where I have to like actively remember, so I'm quite forgetful, and like if I'm trying to leave the house, it takes me about 4 times to get out the door because I'm like, I've forgotten my keys, I've forgotten this. But then I'm also quite fidgety and don't really sit still, can never sit in a chair normally. I like to sit cross-legged a lot. So like my office chair at home is wider so I can sit cross-legged.
Okay. And does that kind of make you feel more comfortable in yourself sitting in that way?
I don't know if it's particularly ADHD, but it just seems to be, I find it difficult to, I don't know if it just reminds me of school, but like just sitting still on a chair with your feet like where they should be and everything. It just feels quite restrictive. But yeah.
Nice. It's interesting. I can't sit cross-legged because I have very old knees. So for both of you, your ADHD diagnosis were very, very recent, but do you think that, or consider that, your time at school may have been, or growing up may have been different if you'd got your diagnosis earlier?
Massively.
Yeah. How do you think that would have benefited you, or changed things?
Well, so even with like my dyslexia as well, it should have, like, if everyone kind of like, if it was more awareness around it, it should have been obvious when I was learning to read and learning to spell, because the thing with dyslexia is you don't pronounce things in the right way or that kind of thing. So I think it's called like digraphs, where different letters make sounds together. So it happened the other day when I was going to the Mary and George thing with Jacobean. I was like, what's Jacob Bean?
Right.
And just like things like that. But then I think with ADHD in particular, I think it would have helped me kind of cement friend groups a lot better. I don't think I was particularly great at maintaining friendships within school, and I found it very difficult to accept kind of criticism or being left out because of like, so there's RSD, rejection sensitivity disorder, connected with ADHD as well. So receiving feedback can be particularly difficult because it kind of joins in with the whole, oh, I'm different from everyone, I can't get anything right, and all that kind of thing. So a small piece of feedback kind of leads to that spiral. And like Stacey was saying, I was like a very anxious child as well. I would constantly be worrying about the end of the world or like never seeing my parents again for absolutely no reason. And I think if I'd just had those supports in place, I would have probably been a lot of more of a happy teenager as well. And yeah, because I always did okay academically, but I never excelled. Like I had no interest in studying, and I just wanted to do creative subjects all the time, and I just didn't want to do my maths homework.
Well, thank goodness you did the creative elements. Stacey, what about you? Do you think that things would have been different for you, kind of school, uni, etc., if you'd had your diagnosis earlier?
I think so. I think I probably would have learned to manage my own feelings and thoughts a bit more, but also I think I would have given myself less of a hard time. I think I was incredibly hard on myself as a teenager. And I certainly, when I was post-diagnosis, I went through quite an angry kind of how different my life could have been. It's almost, I think folks kind of describe it as grief, like loss of what could have been. Like, not that I suspect my path may have been any different. I was still quite academic. I enjoy the intellectual challenge, but I think I would have given myself, a bit like Georgia, less hard time over maintaining friendships. I am a terrible friend and a wonderful friend all at the same time. I will forget to text you back. Like it will not enter my brain to text you back, but then I'll pick up the phone and have a conversation with you and you're like, you didn't text me back. And I'm like, oh yeah, so I didn't. But also I think, I don't know how this manifests for others, but hyperfixation in kind of getting stuck down a rabbit hole on a particular topic or a particular hobby. Like I'd like £1 for every hobby I've tried and bought all the gear, every single bit of gear. And then 2 weeks later, I've been like, you know what, that's not for me. And then you have to sell all the gear. And that was useful from a studying and academia point of view, because as long as you were studying something you were interested in and coupled with your kind of good memory, which I do have, that was helpful. When you take that to the extreme about hyperfixating on, for example, why somebody excluded you from a trip to the metro centre, that's when that anxiousness, the kind of making up stories that just aren't real, like, and that level of energy that you expel in your head is phenomenal. And I just think if I'd known earlier, I might have been able to deal with that more sustainably and not burn myself out or get really tired.
I mean, you talked about, I've forgotten the word now. I was looking for catastrophization, or catastrophizing about things. And again, that's something that I have noticed with Morgan, my daughter, that if I say, well, I don't want to come to the gym with you today, I just don't want to go to the gym. But it's, oh, you don't want to go to the gym because you don't want to spend time with me, and I'm not going to go because everyone's going to look at me while I'm there, and blah. And then it just spirals. But it's just a really simple, I'm just not feeling it today. Georgia, do you do that as well sometimes? Yeah.
Everything feels so personal. Like it was a massive thing for me in uni learning that, because like obviously when you do design, like there's a lot of feedback and criticism. So like learning to manage that was a steep learning curve.
Mhm.
And just like, all right, okay, so if that isn't quite right, it's not because I'm terrible and I'm the worst designer and I've made a terrible decision going down this career pathway and I know nothing. It's just I didn't get that bit quite right.
Yeah.
And I can actually learn from that and take it forward next time. And not everything is the end of the world every time.
Excellent. So we've talked about late diagnosis, particularly for women, for females. And there's been a lot in the media recently, and certain celebrities getting their late diagnosis. I mean, I think I read Mrs. Hinch had to bring cleaning into it. She, similarly to you, Stacey, her son was going through his assessment, and as she was filling in the questionnaire, she was like, "Well, this is
Yeah.
exactly me." And then she went through her own assessment, and she was also diagnosed. But what is it? Why do you think that so many women are being diagnosed so late? Whether it's in their journey or at a later age, because obviously, Georgia, you're only 27. Stacey, I'll come to you first on that one.
I think a few things. I think, in my personal opinion, I think women tend to be more internalized in the way that ADHD shows up. The hyperactivity isn't always physical, it tends to be mental activity. And the inattentiveness is sometimes, I guess, kind of quite sexistly a girl thing, daydreaming, role playing, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think there's some gender bias in there. I also think that there is a kind of a realization point when you have your own kids and something's not quite right, but you don't know what it is. And
Yeah.
then you start with the reading and all of that stuff. And then you go, oh no, this is me too. I know where they got it from. And kind of leading into that. And by the way, when you're a neurodiverse parent trying to parent a neurodiverse child, wow, that's great fun. And then when you've got a neurotypical child as well, yeah, I mean, wow, that's a whole
Challenges.
different podcast. But then the last bit I would say is I think there's a lot more awareness more generally now
Mhm.
in terms of, and some good, some bad, some right, some wrong, right? TikTok has a lot to answer for. But I think there's a lot more awareness and a lot more research on what ADHD is and what it isn't. And actually a realization that you don't need to medicate every case of ADHD
Yeah.
either. And so I think all of that combined in a kind of washing machine of cultural expectation of women and all the gender bias that happens, and you start layering intersectionality into that, you can see why people don't seek help until it kind of either reaches crisis point
Yeah.
or somebody suggests it to them.
Yeah. Georgia, do you
So
do you
I
agree with that?
think also like a lot of the medical research was always conducted on like younger boys
Yeah.
and everything. So like looking at how it presents in different genders didn't really come up until a lot later. So I think it's also like the medical profession understanding it more from the side of different gender experiences as well. But then I also think the accessibility to information as well. So like for me, I'm not massively into reading big things. I'm like, I want a checklist of like whether this applies to me.
Yeah. So kind of make it simple.
Yeah.
Rather than having to read through reams and reams of information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now there's more accessibility to that kind of information and people sharing their stories. And I know Stacey mentioned TikTok. Like obviously not every TikTok means you have ADHD.
Yeah.
But maybe if you're seeing your experiences reflected in lots of different stories, maybe there is something in that. And I think that has empowered a lot of people to seek diagnosis if they need to.
I mean, I think there's, with any social media, there's good and bad, and I think, if you do see something and that resonates with you, and you think, yeah, this could apply to me. I think the important thing is to not then, label yourself and go, oh, well, I've seen it, I've definitely got ADHD or
Yeah.
I've got autism. It's to then take that information and do some more research, seek medical opinions on that. So we'll leave that one there. But just going back to, we talked about, I think we've covered it a couple of times, about masking, and that is something that women typically do, in order to kind of, to fit in, to watch people, take social cues from people. Do you both find that you have done that within your lives, either before your diagnosis or after? Stacey, do you want to take
Sure.
that one?
I still do it. I do it less, I think. But I do come to work with a certain version of me. I've got better, I think, at sharing when I'm kind of not feeling it. It's funny, I was talking to a couple of the directors the other day, and it's like lunchtime, and I was like, I'm kind of done peopling. Like I haven't got any people energy left. Can
Yeah.
you give me an hour? I need to go and walk or something. And I think that's how it shows up for me. Is I'm really good in social situations. People would say I'm come across as a really confident person, but I think that is you learn to read the room really quickly at an early age when you tend to be neurodiverse, because that tends to tell you how you need to fit in,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. So you can drop me in a social situation and I will do it, but man, I'll be tired afterwards because I am being what other people want me to be.
And you're just
Which is
using up a lot of energy just trying
just a
to,
lot of energy.
yeah,
And I love being in the office. I do get my energy from people, but I get my energy from people who um who are kind of, I don't want to make it a judgment, like good for me in the sense of they challenge me.
yeah,
We can have honest conversations, but it comes with a flip side. And I don't know if this is true for Georgia, but for a flip side, it comes then I overanalyze the conversation afterwards and go, oh, you said something stupid. Why did you say that? Why did you overshare that? And then it goes around the cycle,
yeah,
right? And I still do it. I do it less, and I try to be much more authentic. But when I catch myself doing it, I think I try to work out why. What
yeah,
do I feel uncomfortable about that makes me feel the need to?
yeah. And Georgia, for you, in terms of, trying, do you use masking to feel like you need to fit in, or?
I think I do it a lot less now, but I think a lot of the ways I do it are probably actually good for me. It's like, it's just an awareness of kind of like not always giving in to my impulsivity, and kind of remembering kind of like the social norms, and like, right, okay, we need to wait until they're finished speaking, and then we can have a go.
Yeah.
And maybe like sitting normally on your chair in the office is probably a good idea. And just stuff like that. And I think a lot of the time for me it's behavioral, because like, again, like Stacey, I'm quite open with being like, yeah, I'm done with people now. I need to go sit in a dark room. And that's why I'm glad it's like hybrid.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just find it, and like, I'm not particularly extroverted. Like, as much as I can read a room, I'm not great in social situations.
Yeah.
I find it really difficult to put myself out there. I don't know whether there's probably like self-doubt and confidence within that. Not sure how much of that is connected to neurodiversity, but probably some of it. And how you'll be perceived. I don't like being perceived. But yeah, I think a lot less masking, but probably still some.
Excellent. Just so you know, neurotypical people are also done peopling a lot of the time. So
Yeah,
it's
I know.
just-
I did say to my fellow colleagues that I'm not sure that's just a me thing. Yeah.
yeah, it's yeah, we can all be dumb peopling. So let's bring it to work. Are there ways in which you think being neurodiverse benefits you at work? I mean, we've talked about kind of being really focused. Sorry, Stacey, I'm going to come to you on that. And I'm asking you this because I follow you on LinkedIn. And in January, you read 4 books. I probably read 4 pages of a book in January. So, do you feel like, the fact that you can focus, do you bring those benefits to you at work?
Yeah, it's a blessing and a curse, right? Hyperfixation is a blessing in the sense of I can consume and assimilate and form an opinion on a topic, pick one, doesn't really matter which, quite quickly. The amount of information I can consume, the speed at which I read, all of that stuff is phenomenal. It becomes a curse or a kind of a challenge when you're hyperfixating about the wrong stuff. So it's really important for me to stay aligned to my line manager and where I need to deliver impact. And that's something I've learned about specifically being at work. I think the other thing is a bit like Georgia was saying, I have terrible impulse control. So I, particularly when something triggers my values, I am very vocal and I can be quite intimidating. And that's something I've had to learn. A tactic I use is I write stuff down. So if you see me in a meeting and I'm writing, just know I'm not writing anything like interesting. It's my thoughts and my internal monologue. So then I can choose when I want to contribute and not, because it's just there and it's bursting to get out, and like sometimes I just have to write it down, and then it's always there. And then the other thing is I have to work really hard at listening, really, really hard, like button it, employ all the listening skills, and that's something I'm still working on. But also I think it's that ability to multitask. So as you know, I used to be co-chair of the Women at Sky Network. I used to be a school governor. I used to be on the tennis committee. This year, I've kind of twisted that on its head, which you will have seen on LinkedIn, and said, I'm going to invest in me, actually. So I set myself a challenge to read 24 books. In 24, I'm on number 6. But also, I am investing in myself by doing my coaching course, because listening is a skill that I want to develop professionally. And then also just expanding out my mentoring. So now I've got a bit more capacity, is kind of taking on some more mentees and mentoring circles. So like, I don't know if Georgia feels this, but if I'm not like full to the brim, I don't feel like I'm productive enough, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Georgia, what about you in terms of kind of using your different way of processing information, or how do you think that your ADHD brings advantages to you in what you do work-wise?
So I think a lot of mine has to do with my experience. So I don't know whether it's like really based on like hyperfocus or anything like that, because I'm still in a new job, so I'm still very stimulated.
Yeah.
So on that side of things, I think it's fine. But in terms of like my experience, I think why I do design and why I want to communicate with people is to simplify information and ensure that the most amount of people can understand a topic. So that's kind of like my motivation for doing what I do. And that's based on not always feeling like I understand what's going on, or in school not being able to read the PowerPoints because I really struggle with white backgrounds and everything like that. And just thinking about how I can help make the world a bit more accessible and inclusive, but still keeping it beautifully designed.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, you did a brilliant piece of work a few weeks ago where you were given, I think, a PowerPoint presentation of God only knows how many pages, and you simplified that down into one page, and it was just like, wow, that's all of
I need
this.
that in my life, Georgia. I need that.
Yeah, you two need to talk. But it was so simple, and why do we have 25 slides when everything is there on a page and it makes it
Yeah.
really simple to understand.
I think just going back to what Georgia said though as well around boredom. Boredom at work is one of the biggest challenges, I think, if you have ADHD, because Georgia said, oh, she's nice job, new shiny job,
Yeah.
still learning, still simulated, right? I must have changed jobs every 2 years for God knows how long. And I think that being able to seek the right level of stimulation and grow in your role is something I've learned as
Yeah.
well, around how you take on extra responsibility or you take a project under your wing or whatever, because I do think the kind of ADHD brain is programmed to work on multiple things at the same time. And boredom can be really disruptive
Yeah.
for you because it makes you start fidgeting and thinking and overthinking and all of that stuff. And that's how it shows up for me. So I'd be interested to know, Georgia, whether that's similar to you in what you've experienced.
I find quiet days unbearable, and I fill it with like learning. So whether it's like doing different courses or anything like that, I'm just obsessed with like knowing as much as I can. Like, oh yeah, I'll do a course about management. I'm not a manager at all,
But why not?
but why not? And yeah, it's just I have to fill the day, because if I'm not doing anything, like time just drags so much. And yeah, boredom feels like the end of the world.
Yeah, Morgan, when she's feeling bored, she will just dive into a series and binge watched. I think she watched all 19 seasons of Grey's Anatomy in about 6 weeks, and she's restarted it again because there's nothing to watch.
That's impressive.
That's impressive. I mean, I can barely get through an episode. But there you go. So sticking with work, and obviously, we are hybrid working, and we operate very much as a hot desking kind of office environment. Are there things that can be done that or are missing from the office environment that would make things easier for you at work? I mean, I know, Stacey, you probably travel. You're in London at the moment. You probably travel, but from a point of view of coming into the office, are there things that would make it easier for you to manage if these things were in place? Georgia, I'm going to come to you first because
Well, I'm very attached to my desk, and
I do.
I like to sit in the same spot every day. And I think just having that kind of like space where I'm comfortable helps me focus. Because like quite a nervous and stressed person, so just like having that little bit of security helps me feel like a lot more settled in being able to do my job. And then I think there is a lot of stuff I could take better advantage of. Like, for example, if I know there's an event in Northwest Corner and it's going to be noisy, I could go get a little pod and work in there for the afternoon or something like that. I don't always think it's necessary for what I'm doing, but if it's something like that involves a lot of reading or focusing like that, I need a quiet space. But luckily, a lot of the work I'm doing at the moment is quite creative, and the noise doesn't really distract me too much. But yeah, a main thing for me is just being able to find a quiet spot if I need it. And there are the options to do that. I just need to actually do them.
I mean, poor you sitting opposite me at least once a week. I mean, it's not surprising you need to find a quiet spot.
We all have our struggles.
And Stacey, from your point of view, is there anything in the office environment that could be made better for you?
Yeah, so I am a bit opposite to you, Georgia, on this, in that, and I think it's because of years of travel, right? I quite like being in different places. I broke my foot a few weeks ago and I had to spend 2 weeks at home, and it literally drove me insane. So I quite like to, everything I need is in my bag. As long as I got my bag, I'm all good. But there are some things in my bag that help. So I recently discovered loops. They're earplugs with different levels of sound deadening. And they're not like the quiet ones. Even the quiet ones you can still hear a little bit, but there are 3 different levels. And sometimes I put those in the office. Sometimes you'll see me in with them. But it's not because I want to block out the sound entirely. I just want to turn the volume down a little bit.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm all right? So I carry those. I think for me, a sitting, standing desk, I am the fidgetiest person in the world. Like, I quite like it when my meetings are all over the building because I get to walk and burn off a bit
Yeah.
of that energy. But I think it's just around, in terms of office space, I think it's good to have options for focus, options for meetings. But then also being able to get outside, like sometimes it feels a bit claustrophobic, and it's
Mhm.
nothing to do with the building, it's just my mind's full and I need to walk. And that really helps me. And then like I say, standing and sitting desks, because yeah, sometimes I just can't get comfortable. And if I can't get comfortable, I find it really hard to focus.
Yeah, no, that's standing and sitting desks for everyone. I mean, they're great,
I have
actually.
one
I mean,
at
there are
home.
a few. Do you?
hmm
Yeah, and do you find that you do kind of change your levels a lot throughout the day, or?
Not super often, but if I'm doing something where I don't have to be like super close and zoomed
Yeah,
in, I'm more likely to use it. But no, I like it. I like having the option, like knowing I can stand up if I want to.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Stacey, if you're comfortable, you mentioned earlier what it's like to be a neurodivergent parent, parenting a neurodiverse child and a neurotypical child. What
Yeah.
does that look like for you on a daily basis?
Well, it's never dull, that's for sure. So Olivia, my youngest, is neurotypical, although she is currently kind of being assessed for dyslexia. But emotionally, she responds very neurotypically,
Yeah.
right? Harrison has autism. He does not like change. He has some sensory challenges, and he very much dislikes school. So we have a challenge most mornings.
Okay.
The tiniest thing can derail us leaving the house. It could be the feeling of socks, the feeling of collars. It could be giving the wrong juice bottle, like you name it, we've got it. And then when they start to misunderstand each other, the bickering is immense. And Olivia's natural tendencies is to hug people and to be quite tactile
Yeah.
and to talk. Harrison withdraws, doesn't want you to touch him, and just you've got to let him come to you. So that can kind of provide some empathy misses when Olivia's trying to be supportive,
Yeah.
but actually that's not what Harrison needs. And then for me as a parent, I am quite often overstimulated, all touched out by the end of the day, and I just want them to go to bed. And that's
Yeah.
not in a bad way. I just need an hour of like silence. And it's really, really, really hard when they trigger a response in you and you have to hold that in.
Yeah.
For example, Olivia had a massive wobble about swimming last week, and she didn't try in the lesson, and that's a big kind of values thing for me. I
hmm
think you have to try, and to like not respond in the way I would normally, which is for God's sake, will you just try? It was having to hold that in and go, talk to me more about why we're
Why?
not
Yeah.
trying here, right? And it took all my effort and all my energy. And after I put her to bed that night, I did say to my husband, I said, can you not talk to me for the next 20 minutes? I just need to like sit here. So it's hard when you're trying to balance and heal your own needs and
Yeah.
understand how you work, balance Harrison's needs because it is a bit different, and then also make sure you give enough attention and support to Olivia in that sense. So it's a constant kind of juggle, and I'm sure it's the same for other parents. But when you are then put neurodiversity on top of that, it takes a lot to control your
Yeah.
responses. Um,
Yeah. I
so
totally
yeah,
understand that. I totally understand that. Thank you for sharing that. I have two more questions. The first one, for both of you, and Stacey, I'll give you a little break, is if there was one key takeaway you wanted people to come away with from this conversation, what would it be?
I think it's just a level of awareness. Like, obviously, you can't respond perfectly to anyone's needs because everyone's needs are different. And if you can't, it's like, I don't always know what I need.
hmm
So, how can I communicate that to another person? So, just being aware of the challenges that people might face at work, and just just having the space for an open dialogue of
Yeah.
being like, I just need like 10 minutes away from you all, sorry, or like in a polite way.
Yeah.
And just, I think just having an open dialogue is the main thing, and it not being like a strange thing to work with.
Excellent. Thank you. And Stacey, for you?
Yeah, all behavior is a form of communication. And so if somebody is behaving in a way that's unexpected or unlike them, I guess a bit like Georgia, asking how you can help. And if they don't know, you know, giving them the space to, or helping them suggest. So, when I came back to work after a particularly difficult period, I knew that I would potentially have a panic attack at work. One of the things I asked my team was, if you think I'm having a panic attack, right, please don't hug me because that will make me cry. But also just say, what are 5 things you can see, right? And that will help me ground. If you don't know, have a strategy for how you don't know, and talk about that as a team, right? Everybody's needs are different, but everything you say, do, all of your body language, how you respond is all a form of communication.
Fantastic. I just want to say a massive thank you to both of you for sharing your stories. I know sometimes, sharing your really personal thoughts can be really difficult. So I really appreciate you both taking the time to share. We always end every podcast with a random question, which were set by our previous guests. So I am going to ask you both a question. Would you like, Stacey, I'm going to come to you. Would you like question 1 or would you like question 2?
Oh, as a rule follower, question 1.
Question 1. This question is, if you could have a cameo in any Sky TV show, which one would it be and why?
Well, that's a question. I would like a cameo in, probably, I know it's not technically ours, but Grey's Anatomy. I followed it right from the very
Okay.
beginning. And I just think like the episode where they all sung the entire thing was just mental. I'd like them to do another one of those, and I'd like a cameo.
Excellent. Quickly sends email to Shonda Rhimes. I don't know her. And your question, Georgia, is, if you could remove any colour from the world, what would it be and why?
Probably like a maroon, because it straddles an awkward space between red and purple in a way that I don't like.
Okay.
Yeah.
Love that. Just check that I'm not wearing anything.
Yeah, I did check everyone's outfits, don't worry.
Thank you very much to Stacey, and thank you for dialing in and joining us from London, and to Georgia. So just going to close out by saying, neurodiversity is about recognising and celebrating those who may not typically think in the same way as you, and understanding that everyone's needs and strengths and challenges are different, and everybody just needs to be treated as the wonderful people that they are. Thank you so much, both of you. Stacey, I will see you soon next time you're in the office. And yeah, I really appreciate you guys sharing your stories with me.
No problem.
Thanks for
Thank
the
you.
invite.